Tonight from Paris, the President of France declares war. Or did he declare it a crime wave? It's November 16th. You're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
I'm standing in front of the French National Assembly. Tonight, in a speech in Versailles, French President François Hollande announced his plan to respond to the terrorist attacks in Paris last Friday. As you know, Hollande had called the attack an act of war. That's an accurate description of what happened to France and an accurate description of what the terrorist perpetrators are doing. More than that, it's what those terrorists say they're doing. They say it's a war, a holy war. They use the Arabic word jihad. But Hollande calling it a war has a legal implication too. Here, let me read Article 5 of the NATO treaty to you, a treaty that binds France with Canada, the US, the UK, and other allies. Article 5 says, the parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. That treaty goes on to say that all other treaty members, like Canada, must immediately take actions to help. By the way, Turkey is a member of NATO also. So that's pretty tough talk. And Hollande announced that he is dispatching France's one aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, to the region, presumably to ramp up France's role in the US-led coalition. Hollande had promised a war that would be pitiless, he said, no pity. But all he could muster on short notice was 10 combat aircraft dropping 20 bombs, an attack that likely caused fewer casualties for the Islamic State than they caused in Paris on Friday. An aircraft carrier is a level of seriousness from France not seen before. We'll see what they do and how long they last, and what happens when the first media report, whether it's true or Islamic State propaganda, accuses France of accidentally killing civilians, maybe bombing a hospital. Let's see if there's any fierceness left in France then. Hollande said it was war, but he also said something that was the opposite. He said, quote, the sponsors of the attack in Paris must know that their crimes for the strength and the determination of France to fight and to destroy them. Okay, hang on, is it a war or is it a crime? Because if it's a crime, then you send police and lawyers and you get search warrants and there's paperwork and you arrest people and bring them before judges and they get legal aid and a public trial, or they can say anything they like and they get endless appeals. That's how we deal with crimes, and they're even more lenient about it in Europe. So that's crime. War is different. You don't weigh things to a nicety. You don't serve the accused with legal papers. You don't document the evidence of a crime scene, put it through bureaucratic checks and balances. There's no beyond a reasonable doubt in war. So which is it, a crime or a war? It's not just a word trick. You don't use aircraft carriers to fight crime. Was it just an uncareful phrase in a speech? There was other news in France. Police made raids in 168 different locations overnight, making 23 arrests. What does that mean, though? Why were police called in for a war? Or is it a crime? And if 168 raids were made, but only 23 people were arrested, what was the purpose of the other raids? Were they raids where the intended target had been tipped off and ran away, or just wasn't home, or what? What is a police anti-terror raid with no arrests? And those 23 arrested persons, are they now going to be prosecuted as criminals or held as prisoners of war and interrogated as prisoners of war? Again, it makes all the difference. We don't give trials to prisoners of war. We didn't give a trial to the thousands of German soldiers captured in World War II. We held them in POW camps until the war was over. Is that what France is going to do? I'd be surprised. That's what Guantanamo Bay is. It's not a penitentiary. It's really a POW camp where enemy combatants were held perfectly legally, the same way German soldiers were in the Second World War. 2 U.S. Supreme Court rulings and 2 different presidents, a Republican and a Democrat, have used Guantanamo Bay as a sort of POW camp perfectly legally The media hates it, the left hates it, but it's what you do with terrorists you catch. Will Francois Hollande seize prisoners of war, or will he hand them over to be tried in courts? This is not legal nitpicking. It goes to seriousness. It goes to whether or not your goal is to win, or your goal is to be seen, to be keeping busy. More importantly, it goes to whether or not you care what the chattering classes say, or if you actually want military victory. We'll see. Personally, I'm skeptical. I've spent a day and a half at several of the sites of the terrorist attacks. There is a sobriety to them mainly, but there is no resolve. The opposite, there is acceptance that this terrorism is normal now. The Charlie Hebdo attacks this January were shocking. More than 1 million Frenchmen marched. These attacks were 10 times worse, but no mass marches, no influx of heads of state. You saw my report yesterday at the Place de la République. People were singing Beatles songs and John Legend songs and smoking pot. That's not what New Yorkers did the day after 9/11. That's not what France did when it was invaded by the Nazis or by the Kaiser, because it goes to a larger issue. In those 3 examples, or the example I used of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the enemy was known, identifiable, foreign. But here, some of the terrorists were foreign. Some, in fact, had just sneaked into Europe, saying they were Syrian refugees. 2 of them had sneaked in and were wolves in lamb's clothing. But some of the other terrorists were born in France. And that's the thing. France and Arabia have been intertwined for decades, centuries even. As I mentioned earlier today, Napoleon himself invaded Egypt and invaded Syria. France conquered Arabian colonies, especially in North Africa, places like Algeria. Once France was the colonizer. Now, with estimates of up to 10 million Muslims in the country, it's fair to say that France itself has been colonized. Many Arabs who have immigrated to France are true Frenchmen. They believe in the Enlightenment, the separation of mosque and state, the supremacy of civil law, the ideals of liberty and fraternity. It is a powerful French ideal that anyone from anywhere can become a Frenchman. But an equally powerful corollary is that a Frenchman has every right as an individual, but no right as part of an alien nation. By that definition, Sharia law and French law are in a deep conflict, as is Sharia law with any other secular national law. Most French Muslims love their country, as do most Canadian Muslims, but a troubling number treat it more like a hotel, a good place to enjoy a quality of life, a place to get generous welfare benefits, a place to demand freedoms for oneself, but not as a place of loyalty. A poll published in Newsweek last year said that 16% of French citizens support the Islamic State. For young Frenchmen aged 18 to 24, that number rises to a staggering 27%. How can that even be? It's not just Islamists who support the Islamic State. It's counterculture Frenchmen, leftists, politically correct appeasers. It's not too surprising. As we showed you earlier this year, a poll of Syrian refugees shows that 31% of them actually support the Islamic State. That's not to say that they or French sympathizers would actually become terrorists themselves. But if there are 5 or 10 million Muslims in your country, many of whom have sneaked in as Trojan horses, it only takes 1% of 1% to act on their beliefs, and you've got a massacre. So I ask again, is this a war or a crime wave? Or here's a tougher question. If it is a war and you have a 5th column of enemy sympathizers in your own country that counts hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more than 1 million as sympathizers, how do you wage a war against them? How does the aircraft carrier work when the enemy was born in France, lives in France, speaks French, works amongst the non-Muslim community? What does France do now? They closed the borders after Friday night. Great idea, but about 20 years too late. President Hollande said he's going to hire 5,000 more police. Okay, but police fight crime, not terrorism. Are they special anti-terrorist police? What does that even mean? Are they still bound by the niceties of a liberal legal system? President Hollande says he'll hire 1,000 more border guards. Good idea, but France has signed on to the European Union Schengen Agreement, whereby European countries say that entry into one country is good enough to enter any other European Union country. No one in the Schengen zone countries is stopped at each other's borders. So a toe in Greece gets you a foot in Paris. Hollande says he'll delay shrinking the French army until 2019. Delay shrinking it. Only in the liberal West would delaying cuts to your military be seen as some sort of a butch move. Do you really think the Islamic State is scared? Do you really think they can't outlast 3 more years? Al-Qaeda has been blowing up infidels for decades. It's been 14 years since 9/11, and Hollande just said when he's going to officially throw in the towel. 3 years. Great. One last point, important for Canadians. Whatever the flaws and limits of Hollande's announcement are, at least they're an attempt. A half attempt, but an attempt. A recognition of a problem, even if he misdiagnoses the problem and doesn't know how to solve it. But what about Canada? What about our new Prime Minister? Prime Minister selfie at the G20 conference in Turkey, too busy taking Instagram photos with adoring fans to bother talking about terrorism with the grown-ups. Justin Trudeau, who continues to insist that Canada will quit the anti-ISIS combat campaign even as the rest of NATO ramps it up. Justin Trudeau, who continues to insist that Canada will still take in 25,000 Syrian refugees by Christmas. 5 weeks from now, a bizarre rush, a negligent rush, a risky rush, with no reason other than to do it. 25,000 Syrian refugees, even though 2 of the terrorists in Paris claim to be Syrian refugees. Even as U.S. states from Michigan to Alabama are canceling their Syrian refugee plans, citing an inability to properly vet them. Justin Trudeau, who stands by his plan to strike down a conservative law that would strip terrorists with dual citizenship of their Canadian citizenship, precisely a law that Hollande proposed tonight. Francois Hollande is terrible. He's just awful. But even he is doing something, anything, even useless things. Trudeau isn't even there. He does not believe anything needs to be done. What little we are doing should be undone, he says. And he's going to roll the dice on Syrian refugees 25,000 times. Terrorism be damned. Stay with us for more of The Rebel from Paris, France.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
As you know, I'm in Paris, France. I flew in yesterday. Well, today, my friend, Gavin McInnes came in from New York. Here's our conversation when we met up at our hotel. Great to see you here.
I'm happy to be here. I sort of have this trepidation and fear, but it's not of Muslims or terrorists. I have a fear that France is losing its liberté.
I think so. I mean, earlier today I was at the Arc de Triomphe, which is an amazing monument. It's huge, it's beautiful, and if you look at its meaning, France used to win.
Yes.
France used to rule much of the world, and it was a military power, and so much of the city still has the echoes of that. The Champ de Mars, the Avenue of the Grand Army, and now it's sort of a joke that it's like Goliath lying down, or Gulliver, and all the little Lilliputians can get away with anything.
Well, look at the general structure of the city. I mean, not here, but you look at Boulevard de Clichy and some of these big streets. They were designed for the army to go down. You know, this whole nation has a history of revolution, liberté, égalité, fraternité. That comes from the peasants with the pitchforks. And I'm not seeing it here, and I'm genuinely concerned that we just are so consumed with égalité that we're forgetting about liberté and fraternité. I mean, the Arab immigrants here don't care about fraternity, especially out in the suburbs. And the general mood here seems to be, so far, malaise. And I think the attack was to get rid of the gray. ISIS's flag is black and white. And they didn't choose a tourist spot like Champs-Élysées. They didn't choose the West End, which is rich. They chose the hipster areas that are gentrifying. They have moderate Muslims there. They're very multicultural. And they're gray areas as far as extremism goes. And what it was a checkmate move from ISIS saying, you're either with us or against us. I'm sick of everyone getting along. And so the liberal left, which is basically all of Paris, has said, I either have to join Le Pen and fight you or become radicalized. I'm going to just do nothing and continue with the gray. And it's so frustrating because it's going to mean more provocation. We saw this with Charlie Hebdo. Charlie Hebdo was a shove. They did nothing. And now they're getting shoved again.
10 times harder. Charlie Hebdo, at the magazine itself, 12 were murdered, 5 others in the city. Well, add a 0 to that. In the attack on Friday was 10 times worse, many more casualties, and yet, landing at Charles de Gaulle just breezed through passport control. They say there was an extra 1,500 cops on the street in Paris. So what? There's 30,000 cops in the city. That's like, 5% more? I mean, there's a nonchalance. There's no million Parisian march like there was with Charlie Hebdo. There's no heads of state coming in. François Hollande said he was really tough on terror. He dropped 20 bombs and left. I think the Arc de Triomphe no longer belongs in Paris. It should be like an old relic, like the Roman Forum or the Greek Acropolis. Today's French do not deserve to wear the uniforms of the France of Napoleon.
It's ethno-masochism, and it's cultural masochism. Au bout, as they say in Quebec. They just seem to want to take every attack and turn it against themselves. This is Israel's fault. This is America's foreign policy's fault. They totally ignore the 1,300 years we've been at war with Islam. They ignore the Crusades. They ignore the reason we invented the Marines was to fight Muslim pirates who were stealing us Christians and making them into slaves. That's all erased. And they just start with the past few years. Maybe it's lack of education. Maybe it's multicultural mongering. And I think a big part of it is politicians and the media saying, we need open borders, we need new immigrants because our demographics aren't cutting it. And I was thinking on the way here from the airport, clogged in traffic, why is it such a crisis that our population isn't skyrocketing or continuing to go like this? Why do cities have to be so packed? I don't understand the impetus for all this imposed multiculturalism.
Well, and I understand the idea, old stock French, old stock Europeans, same in Canada and the United States, just aren't having a lot of kids. So to keep the welfare state, you need a lot of young workers. But the irony there is, especially here in Europe, these new immigrants from Arabia and Africa, they're on welfare. They're not going straight into the factories as high productivity workers. Maybe they're working in low skill labor or in the service industry, but the economic justification for mass immigration falls apart when you look at the welfare demands, the healthcare demands, and finally the terrorist costs too.
Well, we both know who's in control of this influx. It's the media and the politicians. They live in the West End. They live in the West End of Montreal. They live in the west side of New York City. And they live in the West End of London and Paris. They're all in the West, and they don't see how it affects the day-to-day. They're not in the 10th and 11th arrondissement where these attacks were. They don't understand what it's like.
And same thing in Canada. These liberals in the media and in politics who love the niqab, the face-obscuring mask, they don't live where they see that. They live in all-white gated communities. These white liberal judges who think they're so tolerant by allowing this symbol of intolerance, they don't have to deal with niqabs in their daily lives. We're on location in Paris, France. Stay with us for more. I'm Ezra Levant. We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to TheRebel.media/TheMegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out. I want to throw one more thing at you, and I know this is it's good to catch up with you. It's nice to see you of all places here in Paris. I read a great column the other day by Daniel Pipes, the PhD. He studied in Cairo. He's an expert on radical Islam and Arabia. He said that this attack will drive the grassroots French to the right, but it'll drive he called them the 4P professionals to the left. Politicians, the press, police, and professors. So he said, in the end, it'll be a wash. You'll drive more people to the Marine Le Pens of the Front National, but every politician will move further to the left and say, oh, we haven't tried hard enough. We have to become more tolerant. We need more diversity education. We need more censorship of right-wingers. So Pipe says that until we have a devastating attack where he literally said 100,000 casualties, you're going to see the self-delusion on the 4P professional left dig in harder and harder and harder, and to demonize anyone who says, you know what, I might not like everything about the Front National Marine Le Pen, but I'm voting for them because I've had enough terrorism.
I think that's absolutely true, but here's some light at the end of the tunnel. People are resenting the 4Ps more than ever. Academia is crumbling. It's a house of cards. And back right before this happened, we were hearing deans all over America quit because they're just so racist. And the academia has become a laughingstock with courses like How to Be Gay. And it's clearly just Marxist brainwashing that is making everyone into an imbecile. And there's already a backlash there. As far as the media goes, we've got rebel media, we've got the internet. There's already a huge backlash against the mainstream media. So the 4Ps are essentially ghettoizing themselves off into some satellite.
But in the meantime, they still control the law, the politicians, the information for most people, the press, the enforcement of the law, the police, and what's the last one? Professors, the source of intellectual ideas, of books, of authorities. So yes, they may be discredited amongst those who consider themselves alternative or independent-minded, but that's not most people. I look at Justin Trudeau's election in Canada as proof that low-information millennials who like to feel good have elected their selfie prime minister. And so, yeah, there may be more and more dissidents like you and me, but we don't have the power. I mean, look at the word TheRebel.media. We are built for opposition because it may be decaying. These 4Ps might be decaying, but they're going to control things for years to come.
Well, I'm much more optimistic than you about it. I really feel like we are at a tipping point. And the 4Ps are at death's door, and we're about to have a totally independent populace. I mean, look at the rise of libertarianism. You couldn't say that word 10 years ago.
It's a rise maybe it's a niche fashion. There's no libertarian who wins anywhere. Show me a libertarian who's ever won an election.
Well, he hasn't won an election, but look how high Rand Paul has gotten. Look how much he's talked about.
I think what you're seeing is a battle between the Democratic mass and the elitist 4Ps. And if you look throughout Europe, you're seeing the rise of right-wing parties, and you will see also the rise of some neo-Nazis, and they'll be held up as emblematic of all the right, especially in Germany. But I put the blame of any fascism, any skinheads, any neo-Nazis, I put the blame on the parties of the left because they demonize people. If you call someone a Nazi long enough for saying, I don't want 750 Muslim migrants in my town of 104. Like there was that little German town called Sumta, 104 people. They were assigned 750 Muslim migrants. Like if you say, I don't want to be the refugee in my own town, oh, you're a Nazi. Well, if you're going to call me a Nazi, fine.
Right. Well, I mean, I hate it when we fight because it makes my stomach hurt. But right now, we're both describing the same scenario. The only difference is I think the House of Cards is about to collapse, and you foresee another decade of turmoil.
Let's say I look forward to exploring these issues with you. You're going to tape your shows. They're not taped; they're live streamed.
Live stream. And so when people see this, it'll already have happened for the Monday show, but the Tuesday show will air live at 10:30 a.m.
You have some connections and friends here in Paris. You're going to try and set up some meetings, either for your show or for us at The Rebel. I'm looking forward to getting out into the street with you because that's where we'll discover, I mean, you're the king of streeters, going up to people. You know French better than me, and look at how muscular you are.
Very muscular. Yeah, that helps.
So you're the muscle here. I really think it's important that we talk not just to the Sorbonne class, but that we talk to Muslims. And here's the last point I want to make. France today is Canada in 10 years maybe.
Yep.
In terms of numbers, I mean, Canada has doubled the number of Muslims in our country since 9/11. Why? Well, it just has. And we're set to double them again. And if we keep on that track, we will have, I mean, right now, Muslims are 3% of the Canadian population, maybe 4%. Here in France, it's probably 10%. So if we keep on this track, we will be where France is numerically. And there are Canadian jihadists, too. And I think that we don't have the critical mass of extremists to have terrorism like they do in France on a regular basis. But I think we'll get there. And Jews are fleeing this country. Jews are fleeing France the first time since the 1940s. How terrifying is that? Last word to you, Gavin.
Well, Canada is very European in its demeanor. Maybe it's because of all the British immigrants. But after those 2 attacks on Canada, we saw a similar sort of apathy that we're seeing now in France. And that scares me, not just because Muslims, extremist Muslims, are a threat to our way of life, but because our own malaise is a threat to our way of life. We need to be passionate about free speech and the right to make rude jokes, the right to be offensive, and the right to entertain each other with the thousands of years of our culture that we've built up, being ourselves.
You know, the left used to love bad jokes, rough jokes, mean jokes, offensive jokes. The left used to love free speech. Parts of the left still do. In the United States, the ACLU is very good on free speech. In Canada, the left doesn't bother itself with free speech anymore because it prefers the power of authoritarian censorship to debating. It's easier now that they have the power. They don't really believe in speaking truth to power because they are the power.
What a bunch of fags.
I know you said that because you're a free man and you're free to offend, and I know exactly why you said that and what you mean. Soon there will be words you can't say.
Oh, soon?
Well, you did a monologue on 30 words. On 30 words you can't say.
Douchebag on TV anymore.
Well, that's maybe here en français. Douche has different meaning. Gavin, great to see you. Welcome to Paris. I look forward to spending the next couple of days with you, and hopefully we'll get out alive.
On y va.
Right on. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant. This is my friend Gavin.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
That's our show for TheRebel.media from Paris, France. I'm here all day again tomorrow. I'll be spending some more time with my friend Gavin McInnes, and we'll be exploring neighborhoods a little bit wilder than those in the downtown core. Let me close with this thought. I'm standing still next to the Assemblée Nationale, a beautiful building with an amazing history. Behind me are the gorgeous French flags billowing, but doing so at half-mast out of respect for the dead murdered by the terrorists. I have a fear that by the time those flags are flying high again, too many Frenchmen will have forgotten about these terrorist attacks. They just won't care. And the war against France, the Sharia war, will just be the new normal. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.